Good evening, folks. Good evening here in the hall, and good evening if you're watching online. If you've been with us in previous weeks, you'll know that tonight is session number 11. It's the climax of this series of the book of Daniel. Tonight we will answer all of your questions. All of the dilemmas that Daniel had will be hopefully resolved tonight for you. You know that you can get a copy of the handout, which has all of the slides that we're going to show you tonight. You can get that by going to our website. Our website is morningtonpeninsula.sda.org. And if you go to the download tab, you can either download previous videos, the previous presentations, or you can download tonight's handout. Session 10 to 12's handout. And you remember that last week we made an offer if you would like a free gift. We've got this little book, Steps to Christ. If you'd like a copy of that free, if you go to the same website, there is a place where you can put in your address and we will send you free of charge this little booklet, Steps to Christ. And I think you'll enjoy it. Friends, we've got a lot to get through tonight, so let's start. And I thought I'd put these comments up first because they answer some dilemmas that come up sometimes for people who are Bible students. And people will tell you, oh, this means that, or that means that. These might help resolve the situation for you. And it says, study Revelation in connection with Daniel. You should always put Daniel and Revelation together. This presentation series is called Daniel Unlocks Revelation, because Daniel's the key. And it goes on and it says, for history will be repeated. We, with all our religious advantages, ought to know far more today than we do know. When a message is presented to God's people, they should not rise up in opposition to it. If somebody suggests something to you that is biblical, or they claim is biblical, don't reject it. Go to your Bible to prove the error of it, or prove the validity of it. So the question is, don't rise up if they suggest something, but go to the Bible. Compare it with what is in the Bible. When it says the law and the testimony, the law are the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and the testimony is the rest. So go to the Bible and prove it. If it doesn't bear this test, in other words, if you can't support what they're saying in the Bible, then you reject it. But if the Bible supports, my technical crew have got a problem because the sun's shining straight in the window at me, but it's the window above the door, which has no curtain, so it'll only be there for another few minutes and it'll be gone. Any rate, if you can't find supportive information in the Bible for the concept that's presented, reject it. But if the Bible supports what they're presenting, accept it and add it to your store of knowledge. Let me advance another couple of these points about Daniel and Revelation. It says, advance new principles and crowd in clear-cut truth. It will be as a sword cutting both ways, but be not too ready to take a controversial attitude. There will be times when we must stand still and see the salvation of God. Let Daniel speak, let Revelation speak, and tell what is true. But whatever phase of the subject is presented, always uplift Christ. Christ is the centre of all hope He is the root and offspring of David, the bright and morning star. When the books of Daniel and Revelation are better understood, if you want to understand Revelation, start with Daniel. If you want to understand Daniel, use what you know about Revelation to help you explain Daniel. When the two go together. But the suggestion here is that if we understood them better, there would be a new religious experience. And we do not go deep enough in our search for truth. Every soul who believes present truth will be brought where he will be required to give a reason for the hope that's in him. If you have a foundation of Bible knowledge and people are seeking answers, they will come to you and test you. If they have different beliefs than you, they will test you. You ought to be able to show what you believe and why you believe it. These were just aspects that triggered my thoughts, so I thought I'd share them with you, my friends. I hope they help. Let's go back and look at our timeline chart. We know Nebuchadnezzar had a dream and Daniel explained it for him. And we know that 55 years later, Daniel was given a vision of the same powers, the same 4 powers that Nebuchadnezzar received, but he was given them with different symbols and more detail. And in that detail, there was a little horn added, which Nebuchadnezzar didn't know. And then when Daniel didn't fully understand what it was that he had been shown, God came back and gave him more information. This time he used different symbols, didn't he? He used a ram and a goat. Now, that's Daniel chapter 8. Then we took you to Daniel chapter 9. And the very significant thing about Daniel chapter 9 was it didn't occur until the first year of Cyrus, the king of Medo-Persia. And in that vision, Daniel was given a timeline of the coming Messiah, and he was given dates when the bigger prophecy of 2,300 years would start and would finish. But all of this came after the Babylonian Empire had passed into history. So it's a new beginning for Daniel and Daniel's people in that God is taking them step by step and he is telling them the significance of the Messiah, because now they were in a position where they could understand the visions and understand the importance of the coming Messiah. That was chapter 9. Chapter 10, where we're going tonight, happens in the 3rd year of Cyrus's reign. And the difference in chapter 10 is the Messiah that Daniel was shown in chapter 9, he now sees as a man dressed in linen above the water, and Gabriel tells him that that man is Michael, your prince. So the Messiah, the Holy One that was coming, is also Michael the Prince. And Michael the Prince is also the Ancient of Days. Am I confusing you? Some heads going one way. Okay, you're not confused. That's good. If you are confused, stay with me and we'll explain it all. So Michael, your prince, is the same person as the Ancient of Days. He's the same person as the certain man dressed in linen, and he's the same person who was Messiah the Prince. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel whose name was called Belteshazzar. And it told him that the time of the prophecy was a long time, a very long time. But with that message, Daniel understood, and he understood the vision that he'd struggled with for now 70 years plus. He'd been trying to understand these visions for 70 years, and it's only when he gets to this time in his life, only when he gets to this vision, that he begins to understand. Let's go further. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, and I did not anoint myself at all. This doesn't mean to say that he wasn't eating. He was eating, but he had denied himself a certain range of foods and a certain range of lifestyle. And that this behaviour that he is reporting here is significant in the life of the Jewish people. The nation of Israel had 2 calendars. Can you imagine having 2 calendars that work at the same time in a year? Well, the nation of Israel did. They had 2 calendars. One calendar started with the Passover, and the calendar that started with the Passover was the beginning of months. The months of the year were to start with the Passover. The other calendar, which happened 6 months later, was the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement was the beginning of years. So the months started with the Passover, and the years started 6 months, or were counted 6 months later. So if you had done something wrong in your life and you wanted to make amends, you got a warning, didn't you? After 6 months you got a warning, and the warning was, all right, we're starting to count the months again, and in 6 months we're going to start the year again, and the Day of Atonement is a new beginning. So you've got time to sort yourself out and to have a new start. Daniel was probably practicing this fast in the year that began, the calendar that began with the Day of Atonement. Because the Day of Atonement you had to humble yourself. And he said, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold. Now, you know, in Babylon there were 2 rivers, 2 main rivers that defined Babylon. There was the Euphrates on the west, and there was the Tigris on the right. So Daniel now in the Medo-Persian Empire isn't worried about the Euphrates, which was the border for Babylon. He is close to the river Tigris, which is more central or on the edge of the Medo-Persian kingdom. But the Medo-Persian kingdom now controls Babylon as well. So it was the significant river in the middle now of the Medo-Persian Empire. But he sees, he's by the Tigris, and he lifts up his eyes and behold. Now, behold means to see. He was to see something, he saw something when he lifted his eyes. And what did he see? A certain man clothed in linen. All right? Sometimes in the Bible we come up against words that have been translated a particular way, and when you look at them, you wonder why they translated them that way. And this is one of those words, because here, a certain, or the word certain, is translated from the Hebrew word, which is ehad. And ehad, elsewhere, is translated one. But here, they have translated ehad as certain. It seems that they really didn't know who the man was, and they couldn't understand why he would be one, number one. So they've used this word certain instead. But everywhere else, Ehad, this Hebrew word, means one. We'll come back to this a little bit later, friends. And this is the description of the man, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl. In other words, his body was not white like I am, but he was coloured. He was brown. Beryl can be a shade of brown. So he was a brown man. His face had the appearance of lightning. It shone brightly. His eyes like torches of fire. His arms and feet like burnished bronze. Here's again this colour. His legs and feet are like bronze, brown or golden colour. And the sound of his words was the voice, like the voice of a multitude. This isn't a normal man that he's seeing. Let me show you something. Let's put down the list of the person that Daniel saw. A man who was before all other men, who was first, clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold. There's the description we've just looked at. Now let me show you the description of the man John saw in the first chapter of Revelation. Let's look at them. Daniel saw a man who should actually be described as first. Certain is not the right way to translate it. It should be first. So the man Daniel saw was first. In Revelation, Jesus said, I am the first, one like the Son of Man. So he saw a man who was the first. The man that Daniel saw was clothed in linen. The man that John saw had a garment down to his feet. The man John saw was a priest. So the priests wear linen garments, whose waist was girded with gold. John saw Jesus girded about the chest with a golden band. His face had the appearance of lightning, and his countenance, his face, was like the sun shining in its strength. Do you see what's happening? When you compare who Daniel saw with who John saw, they're the same, they have the same characteristics, the same things occur. It is likely that the one John saw is exactly the same one that Daniel saw. Both John and Daniel, you can assume from this comparison, saw the same person. Do you remember back when we did chapter 7, there was an Ancient of Days, and I might have rocked a few of you when we suggested to you that the Ancient of Days was actually Jesus. But I didn't just suggest it to you, I took you to the Bible and I showed you that the term Ancient of Days applied to the Holy One of Israel, and the Holy One of Israel in the Old Testament was Jesus. So here's the description of the Ancient of Days in chapter 7. Let's go to Revelation and see if there is similarity between the Ancient of Days and the God that John saw in Revelation. The Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow. John saw one like the Son of Man, clothed with the garment down to his feet, and his countenance was like the sun shining in its strength. In other words, his clothing shone brilliantly. And the head and the hair of his head was like pure wool. John said, his head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow. The same comparison. His throne was a fiery throne. From the throne proceeded lightnings. Fire shot out from the throne. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated, and the court was seated. I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, and the books were opened. And the books were opened in the court of the Ancient of Days. And it said, and 1,000 thousands ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. John says the number of them was, this is talking of the angels around the throne, 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. And who did John say they were around the throne of? And who were they praising on that throne? They were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain." The implication is the one we're looking at in Revelation is the same as the Ancient of Days in Daniel chapter 7. And the Ancient of Days in Daniel chapter 7 would match with Daniel chapter 10, the man dressed in linen. In the vision of chapter 9, Daniel was told that his people should put an end to sin and anoint the Most Holy. And the time they had for them to do that was until the Messiah, the Prince, came. There was a Messiah who was coming, and he was a prince, and they had to get ready for him. They had to anoint, or be ready to anoint him, to accept him, and he was the Most Holy One. So the Most Holy One that was to be anointed was Michael, the Prince. In Hebrew, to anoint with oil is to consecrate. Messiah means one who is anointed, consecrated. The one Israel was to anoint was the Most Holy, and he was also the Messiah, the Prince. So it is telling you, it's telling me, it's telling all of us, that the Messiah, the Prince, is the Most Holy One. In Daniel's vision, the Messiah, the Most Holy One, was to be cut off, to die. In God's creation, death only occurs on this planet. For the anointed, the Most Holy, the Messiah, the Prince, to die on this planet, he had to be a man. So this is telling us that the Most Holy One of Israel is going to become a man, and as a man, he is going to die. The reaction Daniel had when he saw the certain man who was before all other men, dressed in linen above the waters of the river, who Gabriel introduced as Michael the Prince, who was also the Messiah, the Holy One of Israel, is when Daniel began to understand what was going to happen. The certain man dressed in linen, he is Michael the Prince. He's the Messiah, the Holy One. Does it start to make sense to you? The figures that we've been looking at all point to being one person. Daniel, an old man at the end of his prophetic career, had all his life been faithful to the covenant law written on tablets of stone and in the scroll of Moses. Throughout his life, by action and word, he had proclaimed the Holy One of Israel, the Lord God Almighty. That's who he knew. That's whom he worshipped. That's whom he followed the law of. It was only in this, his last vision, chapters 10 to 12, when he met the man who was preeminent before all other men, above the water in the river, in the attire of a priest, who Gabriel told him was Michael, your prince, that a clear understanding of who and what the Holy One of Israel would do for mankind came to him. He's being told the Holy One of Israel is going to come as a man. And as a man, he will be killed. But then he will be restored again to his place in heaven, and salvation will belong to him. This is when Daniel began to get an understanding. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled and hid themselves. Interesting thing. When men come into the presence of Christ, of God, what happens to them? They get fear. Fear grips them, and they flee. They run away. There is this reaction of fear, and it's described in the Bible. Let me show you a couple. They shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth, from the terror of the Lord and his glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake the earth mightily. John described Jesus' second coming, and this is what he said. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man. Who does that leave? You've got the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man. Who else is left? We're in that. That's everyone. There is somebody left, and we'll come to that. What did they do? They hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. The same person. Fear grips them when they realise that they're going to be judged by the person who committed no sin. Moses said, the people witnessed the thunderings and the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, and when they saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. They were scared to be in the presence of God. But when a man like Daniel, who believes in God, comes into the presence of God, does he flee in terror? No. Something different happens to him and to other prophets. What happened to them? When I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and I am the last. This is actually what happened with John. When John saw Christ, he fainted, and he was as if he was dead on the ground. But God raised him up. Christ raised him up. Ezekiel, he saw God. And what happened when Ezekiel saw God? So when I saw it, the vision of God, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of the Holy One speaking, and he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Again, he faints or collapses. When Daniel heard the voice from above the river in chapter 8, and now in chapter 10, when he saw the man dressed in linen, his reaction was the same as the other prophets. What happened to him? Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigour was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. So he's collapsed or fainted onto the ground. And it was when he saw the vision. And it said, no strength remained in me. It was as if he was dead, but he wasn't dead. Okay. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for I have been sent to you. This man was with Daniel. And it was very likely that it was Gabriel who touched him. While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said to me, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day when you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words." Verse 13. But the prince, this is Gabriel speaking to Daniel, and he said, "I've come because you were wanting an answer." And he said, but the prince, now this isn't Michael the prince, this is another prince, and in this case it means another ruler, another lord, another person in charge of the kingdom of Persia, withstood me 21 days. Daniel had been fasting for 21 days and had had no answer. Gabriel says, the ruler of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And then he said, and behold. When we say, and behold, what do we mean? What do we look at just a few verses ago? Daniel saw a man above the water of the river, didn't he? He beheld him. So what's Michael saying to Daniel here? Daniel, see. And who was he to see? Michael. And he goes on and says, and the translators say, one of the chief priests or one of the chief princes came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Gabriel's saying, I'm left alone with this king of Persia, nobody to help me. But then Michael, the one I want you to see, came to help me. And what happened when he came to help me? Well, I then could come to you. How long had Daniel been fasting? 21 days. So this was the day that Michael had come to Gabriel to help him. Gabriel was explaining why it had taken 21 days for him to come and what had changed so that he could come to Daniel. Well, between the words 21 days and Michael, there is this word, behold, see, and that. So, who was Gabriel directing Daniel to see? Who was there? Michael. Who was there with Gabriel and Daniel? Well, there was the man dressed in linen above the waters. So, who then is the man dressed in water above, the man dressed in linen above the water? It'd be different, funny if he was dressed in water above the linen, wouldn't he? Yes, let's get it the right way round. All right. So who is the man dressed in linen above the water? He can only be Michael. So Michael had come. Zdravko Stefanovic writes, there is a body of thought that believes the prince of Persia in chapter 10 was Satan, who had been equal in rank with Gabriel. If this was the case, it would have taken one mightier than Gabriel to break the deadlock Gabriel was experiencing. If Satan is equal with Gabriel, Gabriel can't get the better of him. So it needs somebody that is more powerful than Gabriel to come to get the better. There is a similar situation in Ezekiel 28:11, where that passage is describing a king of Tyre. That king of Tyre is understood to be Lucifer. So here in chapter 10, the king of Persia, or the prince of Persia, is probably Lucifer as well. Revelation chapter 12 symbolises Satan as a dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. The heads are understood to be earthly kingdoms. Though these 7 kingdoms will come and go, the power behind them is Satan. One of those heads is the head of Media and Persia. Another one is Greece. So it is likely that the king of, or the prince of Persia that Gabriel was fighting with was actually Lucifer. And he had to stop Lucifer from interfering in what God wanted the king, the real earthly king of Persia, to do. On 5 occasions, Michael is spoken of in prophecy. 3 in Daniel, once in Jude, and once in Revelation. He was or is in dispute with Satan on each occasion that the name Michael is used, and on each occasion he overcomes Satan. This has convinced theologians that Michael is Jesus. The translation of Ehad in this passage, one of the chief princes, differs when you compare it to Ehad as it was used in verse 5, which I spoke about a few moments ago. In verse 5, it was translated certain, but here it's translated in the way that it's usually translated, and it's usually translated as one or first. It's an ordinal number. An ordinal number means it's the first in a series. In this case, he would be the first man or the preeminent man. Okay, so if the translators, by using the word certain, have obscured the meaning of the man who was dressed in linen above the river. They're not giving the correct meaning. Yet Ehad, if it was rendered as one or first, fits better with the next word that we're going to look at, which is chief. Chief means first in place, time, or rank. If I'm chief, I'm before everyone else. And the examples they give here is an ancestor is first. An ancestor is before the people that are alive today. And in this case, it's before time began. They're first in time. They're the eldest, they're the forefather, they're the former. Everything here is pointing to 2 ones being put together. One means he is one, and then it goes on, of the chief, of the first, the preeminent, the most important person. So it is actually making the position more important, not less important, all right? And princes shouldn't be princes, but should be, he is the one, the preeminent prince. He's the one. There is no other one. In Daniel 7, 9, 13 and 22, the title Ancient of Days was used by Daniel to describe the Holy One of Israel, the Lord God Almighty. Jesus the Messiah was unknown to the prophets and the people of the Old Testament. They didn't know Jesus, the man, and they didn't know what Jesus, the man, would do. In Daniel, he is called Michael, one who is like God, and he is a prince. He was not understood to be the Holy One of Israel. The people of the Old Testament couldn't understand how God could become man. They couldn't understand that. But it wasn't until Daniel's personal experience of seeing the one who was before all other men, dressed in the linen of a high priest or a king, above the waters of the river, who Gabriel told him to see, Michael, who is first in place, time and rank, who is Lord, that Daniel began to understand. Michael, the one who is like God, he is the prince, but he is actually seeing Michael, the one who is first in place, time, rank, who is Lord. In addition to Michael, one of the chief princes, Hebrews, the Hebrew word meaning Sar means prince. Here in Daniel 13, he is Michael, your prince, in Daniel 10:21, and he is the great prince in Daniel 12:1. So his rank increases each time he is shown to Daniel. Because here in Daniel's final vision, the use of the title prince is associated with Michael, consideration should also be given to the other uses of the same term prince in Daniel's prophetic visions. What am I meaning? Well, in chapter 9, he was the Messiah, the prince. But you know, prince means the one before all other people. So he is Michael, the one who is not like God, but Michael who is God. He is the one before all other men. And then there was the Prince of the Hosts. There was the Lord of the Hosts. The Lord of the Host you understand to be God, to be Christ. And that's what the Prince of the Host is saying. And then there is the Prince of Princes, the Lord of Lords, the one before all other lords. Now I have come to, and this is what Gabriel then says, now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. When he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face towards the ground and became speechless. And suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him who stood before me, the one who had the likeness of the sons of man, we've seen before. We've come across this before in this series. And in this series, it was Gabriel, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning. So it is likely Gabriel touched him and he was able to speak. My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me and I have retained no strength. For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me. He is like dead. He's not breathing, and yet he's alive. Who can sustain somebody without breath and they still be alive? Who can do that? The one who made us all, can't he? Daniel said to Gabriel that his reaction to the vision of the man dressed in linen above the water had left him unable to talk. Then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be to you, be strong, yes, be strong. So when he spoke with me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. So the next person that speaks is going to be the Lord he is talking to. So who's the next person that spoke? Well, Gabriel asks a question and he answers it. Then he said, Do you know why I have come to you? Gabriel had explained to Daniel that he and Michael the prince, who had the likeness of a man dressed in linen, who Daniel had just seen, were involved in an ongoing spiritual war with the kings of the earth on behalf of his people. That's what Gabriel had just told him, hadn't he? Then he says, and I must now return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. So he's in battle with the prince of Persia, but the next prince that's going to come on the scene is the prince of Greece. We've come across this before. Oh, will you stop doing this for me? Maybe if I shift my finger on the button, it will work better. Okay, that's working better. But I will tell you what is noted in the scriptures of truth. Now, this is the one speaking who was going to be the Lord that spoke next. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. So who's the one speaking? He's saying, nobody upholds me except Michael. So who is it that's speaking? It's Gabriel. And in the first year of Darius, or Darius the Mede, Cyrus, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia. The 4th shall be far richer than them all, and by his strength and through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. So Daniel is being told Persia is going to stir up Greece, and Greece is going to attack them and overcome them. That's what he's being told. Then a mighty king shall arise who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Here is a mosaic from a Roman villa showing Alexander in battle against the Persians. And the Persian kingdom fell to Greece, but the Grecian kingdom that took over was then broken up into 4 parts. Remember the ram that had the big horn that was broken into 4 pieces? This is the same prophecy. This is a continuation of that prophecy. And you can see here how the kingdom was broken up. At this point in his commentary, this is a commentary. It's not a vision. Gabriel is speaking to Daniel and telling him what is going to happen, as I am speaking to you and telling you what this means. And who is the one that is explaining it? Well, it's Gabriel. And he says, let me praise it. I'm going to put a whole chapter into 1 paragraph. And what am I going to tell you? Well, this chapter 11 is about an ongoing war that Gabriel is involved in on behalf of God's people. And he uses the king of the south and the king of the north to describe the people that are fighting. And first of all, he says, the king of the south is going to attack the king of the north, and the king of the north will then come back and attack the king of the south, and it goes backwards and forwards. But in the course of the chapter, he also indicates that they're going to attack the Prince of the Covenant, the Lord of the Covenant, the Prince of Princes, the Prince of Hosts. They're going to attack Christ. And he describes the one that is going to attack Christ as a vile person. Now, remember what we told you before. These kingdoms have a power behind them. And the power behind them is Satan. So Satan is controlling these kings to do the bidding that he wants them to do. Okay? So let's come on to the end of this chapter, verse 45. And it says, he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end and no one will help him. This is the vile person. You know him from previous prophecies in this book as the little horn. Here he's described as a vile person. When it says between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, what does it mean? Well, seas in prophecy mean people, nations, and tongues. Glorious holy mountain means God's sanctuary, God's people. So he shall stand between the people of the earth and God's sanctuary and God's people. He's going to put himself between man and God. He's going to make out as if he is God. That's what it's telling you. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. Michael shall stand up. Michael who stands up. If you want to read about this in the Bible, I've given you references. And this is one good reason to have the notes. You'll see the references there. Look at Revelation chapter 18, verse 4, and look at Revelation 19, 11 to 16. This is Michael standing up. And there shall be a time of trouble. Time of trouble in this case means the preparations for the battle of Armageddon. And with the battle of Armageddon, there are 7 last plagues poured out on this earth by God, God's wrath. You need to understand that. And you can see that if you read Revelation chapter 13 and Revelation chapters 15 and 16 will tell you what that's all about. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. If you want to be part of what is recorded here, being delivered by Michael, your prince, your name has got to be written in a book. Which book is it talking about? Well, it's talking about the book of life. And you'll find that if you want to know more about the book of life, read Revelation chapter 3, verse 5. There are other references, but that's the best one close at hand. And many of those who sleep in the dust of earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting contempt. Everlasting life and contempt, if you want to read about those in the Bible, go to Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 to 6, and that will explain both everlasting life and contempt. A good way to find out the answer there. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. Christ is described as shining like the sun. So those people who are wise will shine like Christ shines. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. This understanding of this prophecy isn't going to be made clear until the time of the end. And we'll come to that in a minute, my friends. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood 2 others, one on this riverbank and another on that riverbank. And one said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" And I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. Who is the man clothed in linen? Michael, your prince, Jesus. And when he says time, times and half a time, what is he talking about? This is the time in prophecy that is given to the Gentiles. From 538 AD to 1798 AD. And it's talking about the little horn. When the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. This is prophecy, and it's saying that the power of God's people will be completely shattered, completely taken away. What will be completely taken away? Well, the light and truth of God will be extinguished. The power of God's people is the truth of God. There's going to be a time when the people of this earth do not have the truth of God. And when is that? Well, that's at the end of the time, times and half a time. I will explain this in Revelation. If you've enjoyed this series, we're going to go into Revelation next, and we will explain all of these in much greater detail so that you can understand, all right? All these things shall be finished. What shall be finished? Well, the treading underfoot of God's people. God's people will not be trodden underfoot for a little time before Jesus comes. We're in that time now. Daniel's concern had always been time. Though I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? At this point, Daniel's dialogue to this point had been with Gabriel, who he addressed as my Lord. The reply that followed is also probably from Gabriel. All right? What did he say? He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wickedly shall do wicked, the other way round, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. God's people will understand, but if you're not one of God's people, you're not going to understand. That's what he's being told. And when was it? Till the time of the end. When did the time of the end start? Well, it was the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary, and I'm going to show you a graphic in a minute or two's time that will explain it to you. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. You've got two more time prophecies. You've got time, times and half a time, 1,260 years. Then you've got 1,290 days, 1,290 years. And then you've got another one which is 1,335 days, 1,335 years. Let's make sense of these. When is the abomination going to be set up? Well, the abomination was set up here. Much of what had been pagan Europe was outside of... You read this, you can read it on the screen, but you also got it in the handout. Let me explain it. There was a European king called Clovis, and he was an apostolic Christian king. He believed in Jesus the way the disciples taught. But in 508, he converted from apostolic Christianity to Roman Catholic, to Roman Catholicism. And that conversion changed many of the kingdoms of Europe from being believers in Christ in the way that the apostles taught to becoming Roman Catholic Christians. And there is a difference, friends. He did that his conversion was in 508 AD. Oh, let me click this. I shift my finger on the key and I shouldn't. Okay. Using 508, Clovis's conversion to Catholicism, the 1290 years would align with the end of the 1260-year prophecy. Clovis converted 30 years before the 1260-year prophecy was to begin. So if you put the two together, 508 and 1260 in 538, they both finish at the same time. Daniel was told that the power of the holy people is completely shattered, utterly broken. All would be finished. For that reason, all prophetic times associated with the feasts should climax before the time of the end and the cleansing of the sanctuary. Everything's got to finish at the end of prophetic time. If that's the case, if we start the 1335 year time prophecy from 508, when does it reach? Well, it reaches to the same time that the time of the end starts. Let me show you. There are many people who believe when you die you go to heaven. Now, remember, Daniel was told that he is greatly beloved, that all heaven loves Daniel because of what Daniel did. And this is what Gabriel said to Daniel, "But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will rise to your inheritance at the end of days." When you die, do you go to heaven or do you rest in the grave? And when Jesus comes back, does he raise you up and take you to the place that he's prepared for you? Daniel's going to be the second option there, isn't he? Here's the graphic. 2,300 years. This is taken from Daniel chapter 8. Of that 2,300 years, 490 was to be cut off. So that left 1,810 years. The 2,300 years finished at what was to be the time of the end. That was 1844. In the rest of that 1810, there was a prophecy that said 1,260 years. That finished in 1798. Now, Clovis's conversion, if we put that together with the 1,290 years, they both finish at exactly the same time. But if we now start the 1335 years from the time of Clovis's conversion, where does it take us? It takes us to the time of the end. Friends, this is the best explanation of these time frames we can give you. All of this we can put in the context of the bigger prophecies. There was the Medo-Persian Empire when all of this started. Then there was going to be followed by Greece. Greece was going to be followed by Imperial Rome, which gave way to Imperial Rome divided. And that was to stretch until Christ comes back again. 4 kingdoms. These are the timelines involved in those kingdoms. Let me show you one more. I'm almost finished, my friends. I'm sorry we're going a few minutes over. 2,300 years. 490 years was cut off from that. That started in 457 BC. 1,260 years was the time of the Gentiles, the time of the little horn, and that left 46 years between the end of that and the beginning of the time of the end. So let's just divide this up a little bit further. The 490 years was the time that the Jews had to accept the Messiah. Did the Jews accept the Messiah? No, they didn't. They crucified him. So their time finished at the end of the 490 years. Then there was the time given to the Gentiles. You know it as the time of the little horn, the vile person. All of that's the vile person. So what happened between the time of the Jews and the time of the Gentiles? The Apostolic Church of Christ, the church that the disciples rose up. That's what happened. Then you had the time of the end. That started in 1844. Do you realise that we're now well into this time of the end? There can't be too much more time left. Up to 34 AD, there was a sanctuary in Jerusalem. After 34 AD, there was a sanctuary in heaven, but there was a living sanctuary here on earth. And who are the stones in the living sanctuary? The people who have Christ in their heart. You can be a living stone in the living sanctuary of God here on earth, my friends. The prophets Daniel and John both knew the God of their forefathers. Each had experienced him differently. Daniel personally knew and trusted the God of Moses, the Holy One of Israel. John knew the God of Moses, the Holy One of Israel, but he personally knew Jesus the man, the Son of God, the risen Saviour and Redeemer. In old age, following long and faithful witness, both of them were shown and understood aspects of God that they hadn't realised. Daniel met the coming Messiah, Michael the Prince. John met the I Am, the Lord God Almighty, High Priest of the heavenly sanctuary, who shared the heavenly throne of his Father and who had the power to end sin and recreate a broken world. The full understanding of Daniel's visions were sealed until the time of the end, and John's visions were what was needed, or what is needed, to unseal what had been sealed to Daniel. If you want to understand Revelation, understand Daniel first. We appreciate your interest in joining us in this series. I apologise for being a few minutes late tonight. Then I was a few minutes late last time, wasn't I? But we appreciate very much your interest in joining us in this, the study of Daniel. And you know that you can see these presentations again if you go to our website, and you can download the handouts. But there's also the free gifts that are available there, and we hope that you will take advantage of them. The study of the book of Daniel is the key to unlocking the book of Revelation. Come and join us soon when we unlock the book of Revelation. Watch this space, my friends. Thank you.